back with more tutorials. Today we're going to look at casting on our CSM with a setup bonnet and without a setup bonnet. If you are using a setup bonnet, you will need that plus your scrap yarn for casting on, as well as your loom hook, your crochet hook, a pair of scissors, and your soft weights. If you are casting on without a setup bonnet, you're going to still need a soft weight, but you're going to need a clothesline clip, so a clothespin, or one of those big claw paper clips. You will also need 2 separate balls of scrap yarn, and you'll also need your crochet hook, your loom hook, and a pair of scissors. So go get all that stuff and we'll be right back. So we're just going to take a quick look at my machine here. I have all of my marks. I have my main mark, I have my halfway mark, and then I have my quarter marks for socks, for heels and toes. I also have both of my cams installed right now. I've got one on this side and one on this side, as well as the yarn guide. It's really important to note that if you are only turning your machine one direction, so if you're only turning it clockwise, you don't need to have this cam installed or in working position. So it's okay to have this one all the way to the top or completely out. However, this one should be at an appropriate tension, depending on the yarn. So you may have to play around a little bit with it, but I always recommend about 3 lines from the top of that gap right there. Other things to remember when we are starting is understanding how this works. So when we are knitting, the yarn is going through the yarn feeder here, and it's being hooked by the top of these needles right here, and then that little flap comes up, holds it, and then pulls it through another loop. So when we're doing our cast on, it's important that we have our rings underneath the flap and our scrap yarn over top of it and in this grasped loop there. If we're not doing that, the ring or the looped yarn that we're using for casting on is going to get stuck in those needles, and it'll cause a jam. And then you'll have to back it off and redo it, or potentially start over again. So that is a quick note to remember. Okay, so for the first half, I'm going to show you how to cast on without a setup bonnet, and that requires you to have your 2 different colors of scrap yarn and a clip. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my machine so that my cylinder is just underneath the yarn feeder, and that's where we're going to start, right there. And we're going to take both strands of yarn and we're going to put them inside the cylinder, and we're going to clip them together. We don't need a lot of weight, so this will hold it quite nicely. And we're going to wrap the needles with the pink yarn, and we're going to knit with the blue yarn. So we're going to move that pink yarn. It is really important that both of your yarns are in between the needles that are around the main mark. So we're going to knit our first stitch with 1 stitch to the right of the main mark. And all we're doing at this point is we're just going to take the yarn and we're going to wrap it around that single needle, and then we're going to wrap it around 1 stitch or 1 needle to the right of the middle mark, and then we're going to just keep going back and forth. So 1 needle to the right of the main mark, and then we're just going to wrap it around the next needle to the right of the last one, and then we're going to go over to the right of that needle, and we're going to go around. Now we're going to make sure that this is not super tight, because if it's super tight, then it's pulling on the needles. If it's too loose, it's not going to knit, so it's going to take some practice. And we're going to do that all the way around, but we're going to just take it 1/4 at a time. So we're going to go to the quarter mark, stop and press our needles, or press our yarn down on the needles, and we're going to turn our cylinder very slowly because we want all of those loops, remember, to get underneath those flaps so that they can knit. So when you reach the end, you want to cut your yarn, give it about a 6-inch to 12-inch tail, and then you're going to slip the tail of that yarn in the gap where you started and where you ended. You're going to reach up with your hand and you're going to grab that tail and you're going to attach it into the same clip that you used at the very beginning, and that's going to hold all of it nicely together. And then you're going to continue slowly turning your cylinder, pushing down those loops underneath the flaps, being really slow because we don't want to go too fast. Right now there's no weight on it, so there's nothing automatically holding those down. Now you could put a weight on it if you wanted to at this stage, but I like having that full visibility. It's why I don't have my row counter on right. So all of the needles have been cast on. They all have loops. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a soft weight on it, and then we're going to crank a few rows just to make sure that everything is a-okay. It's looking like everything cast on quite nicely. And this is where we would adjust our tension, because this is a scrap yarn, which is why we try to use scrap yarn that is similar in size to what we're going to be knitting with. And it looks like I am good to go. Okay, so you've done cranking your rows, you've done testing your yarn. Now you want to take this off your needles because you do not need it anymore. So all you're going to do is you're going to just take the yarn out of work and you're just going to set it up there so it's out of the way. Put your hand underneath the machine and just let the needles fall off. Now that weight is off. Now you'll have to put that weight down to get them off. There we go. Sometimes they don't want to come off, but now they're all off, and now you are ready to start again with your project or as practice to cast on with those loops again. Now it is time to do that with a setup bonnet. All you will need is your scrap yarn, a soft weight, and your setup bonnet. So what I like to do is like to get my machine to the main mark. I like to pop my weight into my setup bonnet, and I like to put the yarn underneath, and then I put the setup bonnet underneath on top of it, or I put it in there basically. Then I slide it into the cylinder with the one ring, one needle past the main mark, and then every other needle after that. So put those there, and that scrap yarn goes right in the yarn feeder. The same rules apply. The rings need to be underneath that flap in order for it to work. So we will lift up one ring on every other needle, and we're careful to not hold our yarn tight. Remember, we're holding it nice and loose. And of course, there we go, that one got a little caught up. Technically, you could do this all the way around where the needles are not in work, however, but I don't do that, and the reason is because I like to know where everything is, and I am always afraid that I'm going to miss a needle or something's going to get hung up. So this gives me complete visual control over the situation. Okay, so once you have got everything cast on, you're going to knit a few rows to establish your cast on. And once you've established that, you are good to either start over again or to continue knitting. And if you would like to take off what you are starting, I hold it with my knee underneath because there's weight there, and then the whole thing comes out, and then you can start over again. Obviously, in both those cases, when you are done doing your testing of your knitting and you're all cast on and everything is good, you can use a single round of ripcord, and then you can use your project yarn and continue cranking your project. I can cover ripcords in your first project in another video, and I just wanted to say thank you everybody for comments and questions, and for tuning in. These videos are really challenging for me to make, even though they're probably really low budget, and so I really appreciate all of your support. And yeah, I'll be back hopefully soon with more videos. So thanks, and I'll see you guys later.